Hello and welcome to the fourth video for week 9 of the Sound Advanced Topics 2 graduate seminar. Week 9 has been delayed a little bit because Columbia's taking a few extra days after spring break, but I figured, I'm just going to get this stuff up there because it might be useful for some of you. This video is different from the other three that I've done for week 9 in that we're going to deal exclusively with just making sounds with RTC Mix. This is following on from some of the elegant stuff that Claire had done at the end of last semester, for example. And I mean, sometimes when I'm doing demos, I just throw just a random sound up there. But there's a lot you can do in kind of really getting in and sculpting the sound a bit with RTC Mix. And I'm just going to show you some very basic things. But the idea is, the thing to take away is just how you can go in and kind of like start fooling with stuff and see what you can come up with. So let's get going. I'm going to use Max MSP RTC Mix tilde just to show the scripts, but again, you can use anything. And I thought I'd start out just by, let's take a simple drone and try to make it sound a bit more interesting using some DSP and synthesis techniques. So we're going to start out with this very basic, a sawtooth waveform with 4 harmonics, and it's going to play 2 octaves below middle C, and it sounds like this. So kind of static, kind of boring. It might be fun for a particular thing, but it's kind of like dealing with a synthesizer with actually doing no processing on it or anything. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is say, well, let's take a hint from a Mini-Moog synthesizer, and instead of 1 oscillator, let's have 3 oscillators. And because we're, in the analog world, when we're talking about Mini-Moogs, they're all going to be slightly detuned from each other. And that will give it the sense. It's kind of like having one violin versus a violin section. Only in this case, the violin plays a very boring and flat waveform. But when we do kind of add a few additional ones slightly out of tune, we get a sound more like this. Which has a bit of animation to it. And, because of the detuning, there's some kind of cross-modulation happening. Now, that was okay, but I'm a kind of guy that likes to hear sounds in stereo, and that was very mono. If you have your headphones on, you'll hear it in particular. So the next thing we did was to take this, and we put the original sound in the middle. There's a pan of 0.5, then to the left, 0.0, and then to the right, 1.0. So we have our 3 oscillators, but now they're in stereo. Ooh. So that's pretty cool. Then I thought, well, let's do one more thing. This one's a little bit subtle, but it's a kind of a powerful tool. We can actually take those 3 synthesizer oscillators. We're going to run them through a delay. Del 1 just actually creates a single delay on the right channel. So we're sending the output of the wavetable into this delay unit and then sending it out. All 3 oscillators, wavetable oscillators, are just set to the middle, but the delay is set to be a ½ second so that the left channel is going to appear, and then a ½ second later the right channel will appear. And by delaying it, you get the effect of like actually doubling the number of oscillators that you have. So again, it's a little bit subtle, but it can really thicken up a sound sometimes. And you could hear the delay in the beginning, but now it's kind of fun. So then you can go from there. You can start adding, reverb, and we'll deal with that in a little bit. You can add filters. You can change the tuning dynamically. That reminds me. There's a couple links I'll put on the website. Through the years, other people have asked me, how can I, make sounds better? Especially Ethan Edwards asked me this a few years back. So I'm going to put a link to the stuff that I had sent him. I won't do a video on it or anything like that. Anyhow, so that's one kind of little segment that we're doing here. The next one is to start with a simple sort of pluck string algorithm. Now, this is a physical model, and they're kind of fun because the physical model is such that depending on the initial conditions, every note you create is going to be slightly different. So we can use that. Let's start out with just a very simple sort of algorithm. We have a pitch array, we're going to randomly kind of go through that pitch array. Well, not randomly, actually. We're just going to like go through it as if it were a simple kind of arpeggio, and hear what it sounds like, okay? And again, I'm using the strum2 pluck string algorithm with a fairly sharp sort of timbre and a decay set to be the exact same length as the length of the note. So we'll hear something like this, okay? Oh, not an arpeggio. What a dummy. Look, I have start set to 0, and I didn't even set it there. But even if I did, the idea was to hear all those as a single chord. So that's a big chord that we're outlining in that pitch array. Okay, so here we go. It's the chord. And not really exciting, okay? First of all, let's take a cue from a real live musician, and let's take that chord, and we will slightly arpeggiate it. Between each note of the chord, as we iterate through that array, 0 through the length of the pitch array, we will add some amount between 1/100th and 3/100ths of a second to each note. So now we get the effect, and this gives it a bit more dynamism to my ear. We get like a strum effect. Yeah. And because it's random, it sounds kind of interesting. You know, it's adding a level of kind of jitter or interest that wasn't there before. All right. Now, of course, like I said, I'm a stereo kind of guy. We're going to do the same thing we did with our delay. We're going to take one side and just play it through channel 0, run it through this delay 1 algorithm, and run it through with a slight delay, 5/100ths of a second in this case, through the left channel, and now we should get a bigger, kind of broader sort of sound out of our guitar. There we go. Yeah, and you can kind of hear it. However, this is actually a trick that they use in studios all the time for like guitar solos and stuff like that. It's still a little flat in comparison to something else, where instead of a delay, we can do the equivalent of double tracking in a studio, where we have one strum being generated, say from one guitar, that goes to the left channel, and another strum being generated, another guitar, going through the right channel. So essentially we have two guitars playing chords opposite of each other. And also notice that we're doing a slightly different start time for the second one. So this will give us an effect of two guitars playing hard left and hard right. Okay. Oops, wrong one. It's this one. Hold on a minute. Was that the one? Yeah. Again, the effect is subtle, but sometimes subtlety makes all the difference. If you listen to it over and over again, you'll get this idea that each one is slightly different from the others, okay? And then finally, we're going to take that output and do everything that all like rock guitars like to do. We're going to add a flanger to it. Now again, I'm not going into detail about how these signal processing algorithms work in this class. You can easily look this up online and hear the history of flanging and what flanging does. But essentially it adds another level of sort of timbral dynamism to it. And you'll hear exactly what it does when I play this. Now, to be honest, I kind of went a little overboard on the effect, I think, but hey, what's life for? Also notice that with these flangers, this is the rate. They're slightly different from each other between the left channel and the right channel because I wanted them not to be just kind of duplication of each other. So yeah, kind of a fun effect. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do is to talk about sort of the sharpness or the envelope of a synthesis parameter and how that can be then changed by different signal processing techniques. Let's take a look at this, all right? And we're going to create a wavetable, and we're going to run it through signal processing algorithm called pan echo, which basically echoes left and right, left and right, left and right, left and right. And that bus config sets up that, output of wavetable going into the pan echo, which then goes out to the real world. Now, here's what's interesting. Usually when I type one of these amplitude envelopes in class, I just say line, and I say start 0, go fade up, fade down. This one I'm using XP break, or exponential breakpoints, where I start with an amplitude of 1, and then over the 1,000 points that we're constructing inside the computer, go down to 0.001. I can't go to 0 because this is constructing an exponential curve that basically goes like that, kind of dishes down. So it has a very sharp attack and a very quick and abrupt decay. I'm using a triangle wave, and again, we're going to this time randomly choose from this pitch array. And we're going to just generate 100 of these things. And we're going to run it through. I've got several different pan echoes because I wanted to show you what the difference was. All right. In pan echo, you have a left channel delay and a right channel delay, and then a feedback amount. That's all. Well, I guess I took it out. But basically, this will wait half a second before you hear in the left channel, then another 0.9 of a second before you hear it in the right channel, then another half a second for the left channel. So you get this ping-ponging pan-echoey effect. And that actually really changes sort of the how this sounds. Let me play it. So already we're getting some kind of interesting things happening as a result of the delay, weird counterpoints and things like that. And a lot of that is because I have pretty hefty delay time. This is like, really you can't hear this delay so much. What happens if we make the delay time very short? Well, it's much different. You hear the individual notes as it goes through the array, but they have this weird kind of echoey sound to it, okay? Here's what that sounds like. And if we really want to goose that up, we can change the feedback amount. We'll make it be something like 9.5, and you'll hear a whole lot of this. Which is almost a very different effect in and of itself. Well, it is a different effect in and of itself. And then finally, let's go down here. This one I kind of like. The trick is just to kind of play with these parameters and see what you can come up with. I like this one quite a bit. It had some kind of interesting kind of counterpointishness, but also a weird kind of asymmetry to it. So here's what it sounded like. Okay, now, this is what's kind of fun. All we're going to do is go in and we're going to change that envelope. Same setup, wavetable through a pan echo, same set of pitches. We're going to make it now my good old line where we start at 0, fade up to 1, then fade back down to 0 over the entire course of the note. The other thing I'm doing is I'm changing the duration from being like a half a second to being 5 seconds. So now we've got these same pan echoes, and listen to how this sounds. So you get a real smearing of the sound, and you can change how that smear happens by, changing the pan echo times, and you get stuff like this happening as a result. Yeah, so it's a very different kind of thing. The other thing that I liked was to take this, go back to that original one, and let's now take the pitch and let's add IRAND 0.001 to 0.002. Okay, let's add a little bit of randomness and add a second kind of wavetable to it, and we'll see what that sounds like. Oh my, doesn't sound like much of anything. What happened there? Okay, I'm going to stop this for a second. Oh, silly me. what I forgot to do was uncomment one of my pan echoes down here. But now I have it. I have this second wavetable with a slight pitch deviation, and now we'll hear what it sounds like. Okay. So much different than the sharp attack one, you know, and in fact, the thing that's really fun to do about this is let's really goose up the feedback so that they'll really kind of overlap, and we'll get a much thicker, kind of chordally evolving sort of sound. So that's kind of cool. I like that sound. Now we're going to do even more with it, though. We're going to take that sound and we're going to run that through a reverb algorithm before we echo it. All right. So the idea is that this should add a little bit of thickness to it. But you'll be surprised it doesn't add that much. Okay, here's what this sounds like. So you don't really hear it happening too much. However, let me change the duration of these notes to be 0.5. And now you'll hear the reverberance happening and the pan echoing grabbing it, and you get this kind of amazing. So now you can get this really kind of interesting, kind of thick sort of sound that's happening as a result of reverb. And of course, the thing to do with that is to change it, take it, and add a flanger to it. So we're going to take this and then do this. I sped up the notes too. So all of a sudden you get this kind of interestingly evolving sort of sound to it, you know. Yeah, that was just, I tried switching the pan echo and the flange. It didn't make that big a difference. Yeah, again, the idea is just, you know, try some things, you know. Let's say, what happens if we add a delay? What happens if we add a filter? What happens if we add reverb or amplitude modulation or something like this? And you can come up with some really intriguing kind of evolving textures that will, I think, really, really kind of, you know, thicken out your sound. So that's that, and we'll talk about this soon.